This is the Cal NEH American English Dialect Recordings Collection, produced with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Center for Applied Linguistics. This is tape number 14, Side A.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleagues delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. The people of the United States have already formed their opinions and well understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, but always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. I believe that I interpret the will of the Congress and of the people when I assert that we will not only defend ourselves to the uttermost, but will make it very certain that this form of treachery shall never again endanger us. Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
The next excerpt is taken from original tape W74.
This is Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt's regular Sunday evening broadcast, sponsored by the Pan American Coffee Bureau, representing 7 good neighbor coffee-growing nations. On this, the Sunday of Christmas week, and the 3rd Sunday of armed conflict, Mrs. Roosevelt has a message so important we shall take time to say only these few words from our sponsors. They are words quoted from a recent Navy Department memorandum, and they read as follows. It is a known fact that coffee plays an important part in the morale among the personnel of the Navy. In total war, high morale is needed not only by our armed forces, but by every civilian as well. Coffee gives the extra energy, the steadier nerves which are so much a part of the kind of morale we all must have. Coffee, more than ever before, is the America's necessary drink. And now we present Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There is one thing about the American people when any emergency arises. It seems to spur them on to greater activity, and the more difficult the task may be, the more ready they are to meet the situation. I imagine that is a trait common to all virile people. I've noticed many times that there are people who lose interest in anything the minute it becomes easy to accomplish, but who will work untiringly as long as the problem before them is challenging. Perhaps this is a trait of the American people as a whole. In any case, the realization that we are actually at war and that we have a tremendous problem to solve because we are completely making over the trend of thought which the majority of our people has built up for the past 20 years, does not seem to faze us in any way. Instead of being cast down, we seem to feel that this is a challenge to our ability to adapt ourselves and still not give up the main objectives for which we've been working through the past 20 years. A short time ago, I'm sure the vast majority of the people in this country hoped that we would not get into the war. If we faced the disagreeable fact that we probably would have to come in at some point, we did not think of it in concrete terms, neither as war with Japan nor as war with Germany and Italy. If anyone said we might go to war with Japan, the attitude was always that we would be so superior to the Japanese that poor little Japan would be wiped off the map. We were very cocky, or perhaps we were just ignorant. In any case, it had the same effect, because it lulled us into a state of mental and spiritual unpreparedness. So remote did it all seem, that we never faced what a victory for the Axis powers might mean, even if it was only a victory in Europe, with Europe dominated by the Axis powers and their ideas. What would it mean to us to have just across the Atlantic a whole continent of people who did not believe in private industry, who did not believe in trade unions, who did not believe in the rights of the individual to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? At least they would not be allowed to express their beliefs if they retained them. There would be a whole continent of people subservient to the idea that the state is paramount and that their Führer, whoever he may be, is next to God, in fact practically takes his place, and that by right of birth and ancestry their race should rule the world. Ideas spread, and it would not take very long for these ideas to cross the ocean. We know how easily small groups of fascists, Nazis, and communists in this country have influenced the thinking of some of our citizens, and yet we lulled ourselves to sleep with the idea that a whole continent could be bent on making these theories succeed, and we would be left to pursue our interests and develop our friendships with our neighbors on this side of the ocean, untouched and uninfluenced. We look back now, and this frame of mind seems incredible. Suddenly the Japanese planes flew over Hawaii and our other island possessions, and it gave to the American people an entirely new realization of what the world in the future, dominated by Axis methods and ideas, would really be like. And overnight we were a people welded together, no longer divided, one great united people for the period of the struggle. Nothing exemplifies this more clearly than the Industrial Labor Conference, which met this past week and which was addressed by the President at its opening session. He said to these gentlemen that he had asked them to come together to help win the war, as they were as important in this effort as the men in military uniform. The President further said that 2 moderators would preside over the group, one from the executive and one from the legislative branch of the government, and that he hoped they would achieve a complete agreement and, above all, speed. He wanted as much speed in turning out materials in the defense industries as he expected from the armed forces of the nation. Fortunately for us, we are geographically very well located. Our territory is so great that it is hard to concentrate on aerial attacks in the way which has been done in England on such cities as London, Plymouth, Manchester, or Glasgow, Scotland. Production has got to rise in this country to tremendous heights because we have the ability to produce and greater speed than any other nation in the world. The President talked to management as well as to the workers. An effort will of course be made by the enemy to take us again unawares, to raid some city where there is a big defense industry. And when these attempts are made, they will have 2 objectives. 1, to slow up industry, and 2, to break civilian morale. Being widely scattered over great stretches of territory is an advantage to us. It also has disadvantages, however, because of the fact that it will be easy to spot a city and to attempt to attack vulnerable points using the same methods which they've used so well in the past. People rarely worry about what is happening to them as long as they are not directly hit, but they worry immediately about what may be happening to their families. Therefore, it will be part of the tactics of the attacker to wreck as many workers' homes as possible. There are only a comparatively few people in management. Their homes are not easy to find, but there are a great many workers. And because they live close together, the production can be greatly slowed down if the workers leave their machines to find out what has happened to their families. It does not mean that we can expect the impossible of people given an attack. We cannot expect that if word comes that certain parts of the city are damaged, the people whose families live there will remain at work and not go to their rescue. We can do all that is humanly possible, however, to keep ourselves on the alert and prepare for this type of attack. Our people can know what to do when air raid warnings sound. If they leave a house where they have little protection, they can find new places of protection nearby, which are somewhat more substantial. My friend Lady Reading writes that night after night she has slept under a heavy dining-room table, and I gather that if you're weary enough and accustomed enough to air raids, you can even sleep through the noise and confusion of a blitz. The President went on in his speech to point out that this means a complete self-discipline and putting aside of personal interest. Every one of us is going to have, he said, a personal must. Young Captain Kelly, who dove his plane onto a Japanese battleship, had no orders to sacrifice his life in that way. It was his own personal must, and that is how, in one way or another, all of us are going to meet situations in our work and in our lives. Labor and management were asked for a quick agreement to speed up production. They were told plainly that the war is serious, that we've not won it yet, that civilization is at stake for the rest of the world as well as for us, and that we have a responsibility to maintain and increase our capacity as the arsenal of the civilized world. That same obligation rests on every government worker, on every individual carrying on his own job day by day. He must make it a better job, so that the community in which he lives will be strengthened thereby. It rests on every housewife of the country to run her home a little better and to meet her difficulties with ingenuity. We are a very fortunate nation, even at war, because as far as we now see, we will have no shortage of food or of clothes. To be sure, we may not have the variety we've had, and I should not be surprised to see great standardization go into effect on many things.
Tigray can't wait! We demand action! Tigray can't wait! We demand action! 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 U.S. airdrop food to Tigray! We demand action! U.S. airdrop medicine to Tigray! We demand action! U.S. save lives in Tigray! We demand action! U.S. allow humanitarian aid to Tigray! We demand action! U.S. pressure pressure Ethiopia! We demand action! U.S. pressure Ethiopia! We demand action! U.S. sanction Ethiopia! We demand action! U.S. sanction Ethiopia! We demand action! Tigray can't wait! We demand action! Tigray can't wait! We demand action! 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 Ethiopia is hiding Tigray genocide! We demand action! Ethiopia is hiding Tigray genocide! We demand action! Ethiopia is hiding starvation in Tigray! We demand action! Ethiopia is hiding war crimes in Tigray! We demand action! U.S. sanction Ethiopia! We demand action! U.S. sanction Ethiopia! We demand action! Ethiopia not hiding anything open Tigray! We demand action! Ethiopia not hiding genocide, allow access to Tigray! We demand action! Allow access to Tigray! We demand action!